Past players, past legends, past legends.
And tonight we're privileged to have on the line John Cunningham. 108 games for Nord, 96 to 2003. Unfortunately, a fair bit of injury in there. 120 goals. Of course, the 97 premiership, winner of the Jack Oatey medal in 97. And if you've ever got a couple of spare hours to spend with JC, he'll tell you every touch. Best and fairest in 96. Team of the year, and advertised the team of the year 96-98. A state game. Of course, he did come to the Redlegs from the Cats from Geelong. Welcome aboard, JC.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks for having me, Pete. Thank you.
Not a problem, mate. Obviously, you've got to start your football journey somewhere. Where was it for you, mate, as a young little tacker?
Well, I grew up in a suburb called Oak Park in Melbourne and played a lot of junior footy at the Strathmore Footy Club in the Essendon District Footy League with sort of the under-14s, under-16s with Scotty West was in that era with me. And then from there, sort of progressed from there. Had quite a good time there for a couple of premierships in those junior years, which was great fun. And then there went from straight through to the under-19s at Hawthorn under the father-son rule, because my father, Jack, played for Hawthorn in the played in the 61 premiership side. So there was sort of a connection there to, whilst I didn't live in the area, it was just sort of an affiliation to sort of start off in the Peter Crimmin squad in the under-17s and then play under-19s I think back in 91, the last year of the 19s in Victoria.
Of course,
Russell Green was the coach. And I had a good year that year as well. But just the whole system changed with the under-19s getting disbanded, and they started up that under-18 competition. So I sort of ventured into that realm. So it was a bit of a journey from there on.
Who were some of the guns around at that stage, mate?
There was we had quite a strong under-19s team. Aaron Lord was similar age to me, ended up playing a fair bit at Brisbane and Geelong, and played I think over 200 games, and he was one of the main ones that sort of kicked on. There was there was a lot of sort of mature players, and I think the whole thing of the under-19s getting disbanded, a lot of guys got lost in the system a bit. And, that was a bit of a legacy of why so many of us came over to South Australia, because I think the system in Victoria sort of, I think guys who were sort of 19, 20, 21 sort of got lost in the system a bit, and the clubs sort of all of a sudden turned their attention to the under-18 competition and getting draftees out of there and not really working on the guys that were sort of, still sort of in the system from 19. There was a lot of players that came over when I came over, or even before.
I was going to cover that. At some stage.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, and did you find that the pressures, obviously, from your father, obviously playing at Hawthorn, that you wanted to follow in his footsteps as best as possible?
Yeah. There was a bit of that. I mean, obviously, I was a mad Hawthorn supporter growing up as a kid, so it was. It was just sort of exciting from that point of view as a young person to sort of be around. The club at that stage, had gone through the 80s era. There were some legends like Dermy and Johnny Platten, and it was so around the club at the time. It was an amazing place to sort of be around, because there was just so many big names with Dunstall and all those sort of champions, the Gary Buchanara and all that. So when you were at the club as a young fella, you got to sort of interact and see them around a fair bit, because it was still at Glenferrie Oval back in the day then. So it was sort of still a very suburban sort of base setup. So it was quite exciting as a young 17-year-old to be around that environment.
And where did you then go from there? How did you end up at the Cats?
So from there, the under-18 started up. So where we lived at the time, Oak Park, that was sort of in the Northern Knights zone. So Northern Knights were one of the under-18 teams. So I played a year there. And in that year, because the under-19s were no longer, when the reserves teams were short in the league, so like Melbourne and Carlton and all these clubs, they called upon the under-18s to fill up spots in the reserves. So that year, a few of us actually played. I think I played reserves for like Melbourne. I played reserves for Carlton, and then maybe Collingwood as well.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting year because you sort of got a bit of a taste.
Yeah,
of,
Zorza was the same. I reckon Zorza played for Collingwood, Melbourne. I reckon Carlton.
Yeah, so
Someone
whenever
else
the
as well.
reserves
Yeah.
were short at league level, they didn't have the under-19s anymore, so they just called upon the under-18s. So that was an interesting year. It was good. There was some good aspects to it. There was some great talent. Like there's more suited the ones that are a bit younger than us, like the 16, 15, 16, 17-year-olds that were coming through. They really sort of like Chris Johnson, who was a superstar for the Brisbane Lions. He was in that. He sort of was one of the ones that came through that system, and a lot of the clubs obviously started to turn their focus to that as a talent pool as well. So yeah, it was, and then from there, I played a full year. Didn't get drafted that year, and then ended up at Port Melbourne in the VFA. My first real year of senior footy. Damien Drum was the coach, who was a former Geelong player, I can't quite recall how I ended up there.
Yep.
And anyhow, well, I ended up playing there, which was great fun. It was sort of your first year of senior footy around men, and which was great fun. And David King was a player. He got drafted that year to North at the end of that year, and I got actually drafted to Geelong in the mid-year draft. It was actually the last mid-year draft. They got rid of it that year.
Right.
So I went down to the Cats halfway through that season in my first year of senior footy, and basically went straight down to Geelong in sort of the middle of winter and started playing at the Cats.
Who was coaching back then for Geelong?
So Blighty was the coach,
Yep.
and I think can't remember the reserves coach, but it was sort of full on. It was at the time Geelong were losing a bit. They'd just come off losing a grand final, and they weren't going too well. It was quite a sort of testy time. I remember walking in and Blighty was sort of, reading the riot act to everyone at the time, and it was quite intimidating.
Yeah, a bit
not
confronting.
Only with the names that you were in the locker room when I remember first walking in. I think the first person I met was Gary Ablett Senior. It was quite a interesting environment back then. And then we sort of I played quite well in my first 3 games, and they were looking to give me a go, but something happened. I ended up being emergency, and then thus had to wait another 2.5 years to get a game. But anyway, that was it's how the cookie crumbles. But it was a great time. It was a fantastic club, and just such big names, and just a pretty incredible environment to be around with. Such great. Buddha Hocking was just a great sort of. I learnt a lot from him, just in the way you have to train, as a professional, and sort of learnt a hell of a lot from Buddha as a training alongside someone like him. He was probably the best ruck rover at the time in the country.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, you learnt a lot. Learned a hell of a lot. And Blighty was full on, but he was quite a good educator of the game in terms of the genuine skills of the game, and he's quite innovative in that regard. He was quite intimidating on the track, like you certainly, but I think that helped you improve, your level of skill, because you didn't want to make any mistakes or errors. You wanted to get it right. So different era, but good fun.
As Matty Robin said, if you could ignore the personal attack from Blighty, he was a fantastic teacher.
Yeah. So it was. It was pretty full on environment, but that was what you were young, and you just had to learn and grow from it and use it as you got older.
We look at Geelong as a benchmark, I suppose, of being a great club. You've obviously experienced it firsthand, and you sort of half mentioned it there. What does set them apart from everybody else? Because they seem to get it right time and time and time again.
I think it comes down to culture. I think we at my time Geelong was it was just a place of it was just super talent everywhere. Like every line, you looked at the starting 22 or 21, and there was an All Australian on every line. So it was a highly talented group. But I think over time, the era that when the Gary Ablett Jr., I think they got the talent in as well, but then they got the culture right as well. And I think that's been the key ever since, is that they've certainly keep recruiting and getting the talent in, but I think their culture is a step above a lot of the other clubs, and they've been able to maintain that, for however they've set it up. I think Stephen Wells and his recruitment, the type of player they recruit, they certainly target certain types of individuals and their personality traits, and I think the Cats culture is, right up there with, be hard to match how well they do it, and they don't seem to have any off-field turmoil too much, or if they do, they handle it really well. But yeah, I think that's what sets them ahead of the rest.
And what about obviously playing in their second tier competition? And obviously we're going to move on as we get through tonight and talk obviously about when you arrived at Nord. But what was their second tier competition like? Because sometimes you sort of get lost in the wash a little bit.
Back then, it was still pretty much like a proper reserves comp. So you actually had guys who, each week you'd play a certain, it would be Melbourne or a Carlton or an Essendon, and you'd come up against guys who either played a hell of a lot of senior footy and were sort of either dropped for various reasons or injuries. So each week you'd come up against some seasoned, AFL players. So it was a proper sort of reserves level comp back then.
Yeah.
I think now I think that's what all the AFL clubs, particularly in Melbourne, are having trouble with, is that it's just a bit of a Mickey Mouse. I think there's 20 teams now in that,
it's
that
incredible.
second level competition, which is ridiculous, really. So, I just think, we probably played a bit like when I came to Nord. There was still a proper sort of reserves comp where you had a number of players in the reserves that had played 100-odd reserves games and maybe 15 to 20 league games, but they were still at the club and still happy to be involved.
Well, you have people like Roger Murdoch played 100 reserves and league games. Andrew Jarvis played in a league premiership side, played over 100 reserves. Dean Renfrey, Wayne Schmal, Albie Menzel. I could go on and on. You know what I'm like. Yeah. And just in that, and it was all sides. And back then, the reserves comp was a bloody and unfortunately, we're talking about the VFL comp or the second reserves comp. Is the same things now happened here, where it's become a younger and younger comp.
At least
sadly.
I suppose it's not as. I mean, it's a very young age level in the reserves. So it's almost like a development league sort of. It's not your true traditional reserves anymore. But at least it's still not hasn't got 20 teams in it. I reckon that'd be just a nightmare. What's going on in Victoria? It'd be an absolute nightmare.
Unfortunately,
particularly if you're trying to develop a young recruit and getting playing in the right positions, and he'd be just like every week playing different position and different. So it'd be hard, very hard. So I think the solution. I mean, it's a massive cost. And it would be a massive cost, and I don't know how they're going to ever afford it, but they've got plenty of money. But I think a second tier reserves comp.
It'll happen eventually.
Has to happen eventually, because there's no other way to facilitate the growth of the game at the top level unless you've got a proper national under second tier comp. I can't see. I just don't see how it could work.
Oh, look, it's also
otherwise
the way the res game. I'll be honest. Round one, Nord lost by 20 goals, and JC, I'll say you're still now a superstar compared to some of them who played in that round one. JC, don't worry about that.
Do you think that's something that's lost? Is that those players that have served their SNFL league side quite well, stepping back and helping some of those reserves players, or is it that the money's too good at amateur level that they're geting paid?
I just think we're in an era. I just think we're in an era now where that sort of it's changed. It's just the AFL is such a massive juggernaut in terms of money, and the drop down to the lower levels is enormous. And then I think guys just get to the point where it's like if I'm half decent at footy and I'm fit and able, and I'm can't really commit to playing SNFL anymore, I'm happy to go and chase some dollars. And there's probably I think what I've seen in the last sort of 10 years, particularly in Adelaide, I just think the suburban clubs have become a bit more affluent as well. And a bit more organised and have a bit more, definitely just have a bit more equity in their systems to be able to support players of,
big time.
I mean, look, I think of Matty Nunn, going to Paynham, if you 15 years ago, that would never happened.
Brad
Um,
McKenzie, etc.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. It's just
Ned McHenry goes off an AFL list and goes to Princes. It's some
Mm,
incredible things now. It's just
mm,
totally different era. I think
yeah,
SANFL clubs don't help themselves. I know they're playing against Adelaide and Port, so they think the players have got to be super fit. But it's not only the training; it's the ridiculous number of meetings. And I ran into Mitch Grigg one night, 8:45, service station, and he still had his footy gear on. I said, "What the hell?
yeah,
What the hell are you doing?" He said, "I'm not home from training from these bloody meetings yet." And
yeah.
so they're not helping themselves either.
Yeah,
Just got to be
it's
smarter.
difficult. It's difficult. I mean, it's very hard. I mean,
It's hard. Yeah, I agree.
the salary cap for the SNFL clubs. I mean, to be honest, it's just ridiculous. Like, how you expect these guys to be basically semi-professional and
And paying peanuts.
3 or 4 nights a week and a full day. I mean, your weekends really, like, even
Oh,
though it's a
yes.
full weekend really once you sort of add it all up in terms of like
Bloody
getting
oath.
prepared for the game, going to the game, after match. It's a
Yeah.
it's a big commitment.
And especially for the reserves guys.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like last year with
Even more so, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and last year, there were times where they played the reserves, then the women's games, then the league. So the reserves guys had been at the ground since 7:30 to finishing presentations at about 7, and for nothing.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
crazy. Now, JC, you ended up coming over. You impressed Peter Rode playing against him, and that played a part in getting you to the parade. Give us the full story
Rhodey
there,
and
mate.
Rhodey and I played against each other in 95. He was at the end of his career at Melbourne, and I was obviously at Geelong. And I think that year, 95, we probably played Melbourne 3 times, I think. So um, he probably got to see me at the coalface, trying to crack a game at the Cow. I played 2 that year. Buddha
Yeah,
Hocking was
go through
actually
your
injured.
games for the Cats too, mate.
Yeah, so
Apologies there.
I played probably nearly 60 odd reserves games, and then I played 2. Buddha Hocking was injured at the start of 95 and had a bit of a sore knee, so he was a bit slow. And so I don't think he started till about, I don't know, there was a couple of games. So I got a couple of games at the start of
Who
95.
did you debut against, mate?
It was at Cunningham Park against Fitzroy, who were on the bottom.
Yep.
And I got on halfway through the third quarter. I think back then there was maybe only 2 on the bench or 3. I
Yep.
can't
2
remember.
on the bench.
And
Yep.
the bench was very much just, it was still
Yes.
not. It was sort of as a needs basis, basically, the bench. So I got on halfway through the third quarter down at the Cats and got a few touches and ran around and had a shot on goal. And Gary Ablett touched it on the line, trying to take a one-handed hanger. So I missed my shot on goal. That was. And then the next week we played Footscray at the Western Oval and sat on the bench and got on halfway through the last quarter then. And that was another threat. We won both games. We won quite well. And then I think the next week Buddha came back and I was out again, which was, that was just the way it was back then. And then tore it away for the rest of it. There's a moment sort of later in the year where I was a bit disappointed. I was playing quite well and there was an opportunity to go in, but they chose another young guy on the list. And yeah, that was sort of. I mean, it's all about luck and timing, and if you got a coach that wants to see, likes you and wants to see you succeed, sometimes that's all you need to break the barrier. And Gary Ayres probably wasn't the one for me to give me that go, but it was always hard because it was just when Gary Hocking was at the peak of his powers, still basically the whole time. So. And there wasn't a lot of injuries, really. Like we didn't have, sometimes you see these injury lists, you go, oh God, if only that happened when I was there, So that was the case. So yeah, we
More science
finished up.
based now though. People who don't play with the sore spots, and that's why they're still playing deep into their 30s compared to back then. We all just played,
Yeah,
Didn't matter what level we're talking about.
I mean, the ability to recover now when you're so full-time professional, it's just like, it's off the charts how. I mean, they all talk about looking at guys playing like the Collingwood players and how old they are, but their care and the ability to be able to just look after your body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year, is massive compared to 20 years ago. It's just
I don't think they
astronomical.
quite consume the fluids, etc.,
No,
and other
At the,
stuff.
at the after-match functions, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so they're not having as much fun as we did.
Yes, exactly.
They're getting paid a lot more though.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Nord.
go.
Yeah, so anyway, I came
Arriving,
over with
yep.
Rhodey. Rhodey got the job at Nord, and so that was good in a way that I went out and visited Centrals. Stevie Wright was a coach out there, and
Yep.
Chris Grant. So we went and had a look out there, and that was great. They were good. It was all good setup, and the sort of the contracts were pretty much the same back then. But it was good. It was good to look at both, and my inkling was just, I sort of loved Nord and the parade, straight away. But I also, from a footy perspective, just having a coach that was new and knew me and the way I played, I thought was just a bit more advantageous to sort of going to a new club and a new coach that didn't really know me that well. So I thought with Rhodey was sort of a bit of an easier fit in terms of at least getting a go and not having to sort of spend half the season trying to prove yourself.
Was it Rhodey who made the phone call himself, or was it the club?
Glenn Rosser,
Glenn Rosser, yeah.
sadly passed away, but
Yeah.
Black Duck, and he was the GM at the time. They actually came over to Melbourne, and we had a meeting in Melbourne together, and then we sort of I actually hadn't been delisted at that point. I got delisted. Geelong kept me on sort of right up till Christmas of the end of ~95,
It's a bit weird.
and then decided, it was a bit. I was pretty angry about that actually, because it sort of put me in a spot where all the other clubs in Melbourne had sort of filled their lists and stuff,
Yeah.
but for some reason they were allowed to delist late, halfway through. So that was me. So it was a bit annoying because I'd started a full pre-season again. I'd been there doing it for 6 weeks, and then they decided to say, "See you later," which is a bit frustrating. But that was the way it was back then.
It's interesting though, JC, in terms of your treatment there by Geelong, but you've remained a fierce Cats man still ever since.
That's mainly been generated by my family.
Okay.
3 daughters are obsessed with
Yes.
the Cats, and my wife's obsessed with the Cats. So I just think because they've grown up knowing that I played for the Cats, the girls all sort of grew up, and I think they sort of grew up in a pretty good era, so they quite like playing for the Cats. So no, I do. I don't hold any grudges. I love my time there, and the club are actually quite good these days. They make it quite accessible to get tickets and stuff for games over here. So we really enjoy that. We have a ball. Yeah, it's great fun.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the girls follow Bailey Smith.
Yeah, they're high on their social media hits.
There you go.
Can imagine your daughters in that regard too. So were you with Kelly when you came out there?
No, I met Kelly over here.
Okay.
Yep. I was only going to give it for 6 months. I thought I'll give it a crack for one season and then then move on. But no, it's funny. I think I had my year here, met Kelly, and then that didn't happen for a while. But yeah, we remained friends, and then as fate would have it, we got together, which was good fun. And then now we got 3 beautiful girls. We're all young women now. So yeah, time flies.
It's incredible though. Out of all that group, the Sir Anthony Harvey, so Dodge Tyson, Sponge Doreen, Robbie, not the real Bob Neal. You've all ended up staying in Adelaide.
Yeah. I think
it's quite incredible.
It was sort of. I think at the time, I think if you moved that out, like we were all sort of 21, 22 when we moved, which is actually a good age to sort of move.
Yeah.
And we just sort of all at that stage where we obviously had ties to Melbourne and various other parts, but I just think sometimes when you move at a certain age and I think the footy club had a big part to play in that. We felt like it was became a second home really, and because we were playing good footy, we were having a good time. It was enjoyable. I think that was a huge part of it, and that's why. And then the longer you sort of hear, the more you meet people, and all of a sudden you think, this isn't too bad a place to hang out.
Absolutely. It's funny, we've had a few of those guests on, and all of them have pretty much said the same thing. I was only staying for a year.
Yeah.
See how it goes, and all of a sudden now you're really legends of the Nord Footy Club.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good story. It's great to catch up. We don't all live in each other's pockets, but when we do see each other, it's there's that connection that you all moved at that age, and now we're the ripe old middle-aged 50-year-olds, and we can look back and enjoy what it was. We're obviously very grateful to the club to give us the opportunity they gave us, and it's always that special bond, which is fantastic. Really, it's really really good to have.
So in '96, so you arrive and you win the BNF in '96. So you had a fair year in '96, mate.
Yeah, I really enjoyed '96. It was a great year.
Except the finish of it, yeah.
Yeah, it was obviously disappointing the end. That's footy, but I think that sort of steeled us a bit for '97.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a flag that got out of what I think '96, both Port and ourselves knew whoever was going to win that prelim was going to win the grand final. Not any disrespect to the Doggies, but I think we knocked the Doggies off 3 times that year, or 2 or 3 times, and Port had done the same. So I think both of us knew, we sort of had the wood on them. For some reason, Doggies sort of got in. They finished on top, and I think they sort of won their seconds. It went straight in.
Yeah,
so they were sort of sitting and waiting, whereas we'd lost a final, then won a final, and Port had sort of done the same. So it was, and then it came down to Scotty Hodges in those final moments with an amazing shot on goal, which was etched in history now. But it was great. It was a fantastic year. It was the only thing I was a bit frustrated with was they had a rule for the state team. If you'd come out of the AFL, you weren't allowed to play for the state
That's
team.
right, the first year or something.
Harsh,
yeah,
because they went over to Perth, I think, and played over there, and. So I think every year they change the rules somewhat.
Yeah.
Either you couldn't play because you'd just come out of the AFL, or then the next year they changed it. And I think they ended up playing a state game in '98. I think.
Yep.
After that was well into my 3rd year of So it was interesting times, all the rules, and
On '97, you're quite incredible, JC. Like you did your knee, and you were expected to miss the entire year. And then you come back, you play the last minor round game in the reserves.
Was that injury in a pre-season game?
Yeah, pre-season. And then
came
back.
So we had a practice match at Max Bashir Oval in the car park out there, Maxi Bashir, Footy Park, and Damien Obst, we always laugh about it now. We were both sort of running towards goal, and he hand passed it over the top to me over at a.
Geez, you're a bit unlucky that he handballed it.
I was running towards goal, but he hand passed it sort of just behind me. So I sort of stopped and propped and just twisted and sort of went down and just thought, that hurt a bit. I didn't even sort of think that I might have done my knee. And then I came off, and Dr. Jeff Verrill is still my doctor now. He checked it and he said, you could have done your knee. And I said, no, surely not, And then I was sort of fumbled around for 2 weeks after that, just sort of, it was quite swollen and sore. And then I was like, went out to training, and then I remember changing direction at training to think, this isn't right. Something's wrong here. And then, went in and said, they said, you've got to have it. So I've actually wasted at least 2 to 3 weeks post the, having done it on the Saturday. I reckon it was 2 or 3 weeks later having the operation. And then they sort of, I wasn't really, I was contemplating just, leaving and maybe going overseas. My sister was over in London. I was thinking I'll just, I'd had the 3 years at Geelong, a year at Nord. I'd actually sort of contemplated, thought, I've sort of given this a fair crack, and now I've done my knee. So it was a real sliding door.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe.